So you would start here from the system that you want the remote access to. So you're going to generate some keys right here, right? SSH keys to be more precise, and that command is SSH Key Gen. It's going to prompt you, or it's going to say, hey, I'm generating a pair of keys. You got a public key and a private key. You can think of your public key as what's happening, what's going on, and welcome back, my ninjas. Appreciate y'all tapping back in for another video where we're going through that tryhackme room and we're hardening an Ubuntu system just using these hardening basics. By the end of this video specifically, you will be able to use SSH key based authentication, which just allows you to SSH to your Ubuntu system without the need of using username password. So additionally with that, you'll also be able to understand how to disable username and password as a best practice. Finally, we will just be discussing SSH tunneling and kind of why that's important to keep that disabled and how to disable all of that. Okay, so let's look at this room, right? So the room, same tryhackme room, part 2. We're in part 2, hardening basics. So task 1 is implementing SSH key based authentication. So let me show you what we got set up. First, we got a machine right here and a machine right here. This machine I have access to, but I don't know the username and password information for it. If I do SSH root, I know that that's the username, and I go 10.10.64.99. It's prompting me for a password. I don't know it. So that's the whole point of this. We're going to be able to exchange some keys with it and do key-based authentication instead of password authentication. These keys are going to authenticate me to the server without the need of using a password. So you would start here from the system that you want the remote access to. So you're going to generate some keys right here, right? SSH keys to be more precise, and that command is SSH Key Gen. It's going to prompt you, or it's going to say, hey, I'm generating a pair of keys. You got a public key and a private key. You can think of your public key as just like the combination lock, and the private key is the lock combo. So whatever digits it is to open that lock. That's the way you can think of it. So if you're thinking that way, you definitely don't want anybody to ever have the private key, because then they could just unlock your combination lock. Hopefully that made sense. It's saying, where do you want to save this file or this key, your private key? Where do you want to save it? For the purposes of this lab, we'll just change it to something generic like root key. It's prompting you to enter a passphrase. You can use a password for this, but for the purposes of this, I just wanted to demonstrate the SSH key based authentication. So we'll just leave this blank here for the passphrase and blank again. Now we've got a key that's been generated. If we do ls, it's right there. However, we need to move those keys into our hidden directory, our SSH hidden directory. That's this guy right here. We need to move it there. So I could have just generated them within that directory, but I didn't do that, so that's all right too. So you just go over there. Now we're in that directory, and actually I got to go back to the home directory, sorry, and copy them over into that directory. So we need both of those keys. I believe the name was root key. Yep, root key. And then you're just going to copy it. Say I want to go to my home directory, and more specifically this hidden directory right here is where I want it. So that's the private key .pub. That means for public. That's the public key. Now if I cd over there or change the directory over there and list it, as you can see, you got them both right there. So that's step 1 of this task of implementing your SSH key based authentication. The task, I'm sorry, is generating an SSH key pair. So we've got that out the way. The second step, you're going to want to copy the public key file. So this file right here into the authorized, or this public key, you want to copy that into this authorized key file. So let's get that out of the way. We're going to do copy root key.pub and then authorized keys. And that's now in that authorized keys file. So all that's going to do is allow any SSH client that has this private key right here, authorized keys files. If I put my public key in my authorized keys file, now anybody that has my private key or any SSH client, they'll be able to authenticate to me by exchanging keys. So the next step is we're going to fly over to this guy right here. And for him, we're going to have to navigate to his directory and create a new file in his SSH directory. So if we do a ls-la over here, we can see we're already in the SSH directory. Now I just have to create a new file. So I'm going to just use vim, and I'm going to call this file private key. What I'm going to do is open that file, come back over here, get the contents of my private key, and then I'm going to put this over. Now I'll show you this really quick. I'm having to do this manually, and because there's this kind of lab kind of environment, but they walk you through being able to do this. If you had there's other ways to do it, copying using the SSH copy ID, but the concept's all the same. Basically, you're getting this private key over into this machine over here. We're just doing it different ways. I'm having to do it this way, but the concept's the same. You just need to get the private key over here to be able to authenticate. If you want to do SSH key based authentication, you need the private key over here. So again, I'm going to open this one. If I do it like that, make this bigger to make sure I get all of this information, because you need all of this. This is your whole entire private key if you've never seen one. It even tells you the beginning of the private key, ending of the private key. And then I'll just quit out of there, minimize this guy back, and then I'm going to blow this guy up so that we can see, make sure I drop it in there. So first you want to get into edit kind of mode, paste that guy in there, right? And then you want to save that. So now we have the private key in our remote machine that we're trying to gain access to this other machine. Or into our, we could say this is our local machine, and we could say this is our remote, right? This is the next step. We want to disable username and password logins. Oh, actually, sorry, I did forget. After we created that new file, let's look at that. ls-la. Actually, let's look at it like this. So, as you can see, we have that new private key file. There's some permissions on here, a read and a read for group permissions. And I forgot what this other permission section is for. But basically what we have to do is change those permissions, chmod, and put it on the actual file. So this will change it to those permissions, ls-la. You'll see only read write permission in the owner's permissions section, and that's how you want yours to look as well, because for whatever, I'm not sure, that's how that's supposed to work. That's how that's supposed to work. You're supposed to have it with those kind of permissions, because the SSH client should only have that. I guess that's how that part works. So that part's done. After you modify that newly created file with those read write permissions, the next thing we want to do here is disable username and password logins on this machine. However, let's just try to see if we can SSH now. But to do so, we are going to have to specify to not do any kind of host key checking, and then, -I, and this is going to specify what key that you want to use, since you're not doing any of that host key checking. And you tell it you want to specify this private key, right? And then what machine do you want to SSH to? And it's this 10.10.64.99. Now I think this is going to fail because this command is only testing SSH key based authentication. And if you have username and password authentication set on this machine right here, if it's set, and I think it is by default, or not by default, but in this lab it's set up like that, this should fail. So let's go ahead and run it. And no, it didn't. I actually got through and we're in that machine. So let's go ahead and disable username and password login as task number 2 of our hardening measures right now. So let me log back out of this. As you can see, we can't get in this way, or it's still prompting us for username and password. So now let's go ahead and try to disable that. So we head over here and we open the file in this directory, etc ssh, and we're going to go into the ssh daemon, or daemon, however you say that, config file. Let me blow this up so you guys can see. Let me get out of there. There we go. So I'm in that SSH daemon config file, and if you scroll all the way down, you see password authentication is set to yes. You want to go ahead and then we'll test our access from that machine again. And let's go ahead and test our access. Still prompting us with a password. We do have it set to disable that. Password authentication is set to no. And if we go into right here, I'll just show you where I got that. And this is just saying but make sure that the key exchange works properly before you go ahead and set that. So that's how you do task 2 of disabling username and password. Actually, let me try this really quick. So permission denied. Yeah, so you had to, I'm learning myself, guys, but there was this part right here when you change this. Actually, I got it out in my notes, sorry, but after you make a change in that daemon file, make sure you run that systemctl restart SSH. You're not even getting prompted for our username password. Password authentication is completely disabled. But like I said, we still have SSH key based authentication with this command right here. And I'll blow it up so that you guys can see. You can see it. Strict host key checking equals no. -I to call out the file. Private key is our file that we want to use. And then what's that remote address that we want? 64.99. Whoops. And as you can see, that other one where we had the root key and all of that other stuff over there. So let's go ahead and discuss SSH tunneling. This is something that's new to me. Let me bring this up over here. All right, I'm back. So for SSH tunneling, I did some research on my own. I found a great article written by Tokyo Neon right here on how to use SSH tunnels to forward requests and hack remote routers. I mean, this is all great stuff right here. I've tried to do this. I was going to try to share it with you guys. I wasn't able to make it through all the way. I had some issues with setting this up and actually running this attack. But if you do get some time and you can go on it about yourself, I highly recommend it. It's great. And I highly recommend you following Tokyo Neon on Twitter or wherever, his blogs and all of that stuff, because it's great. Definitely good information. So here, they just tell us basically SSH tunneling allows you to forward the SSH connection that you have to a computer device running SSH so that you can still use the services of that remote device, is how I understand it. Again, I don't know too much about it, but I do know to protect yourself from having SSH tunneling issues, you're going to go into that same daemon config file that we were in. It's the same file. Now, if you're new to all of this, right, these files, they look intimidating at first, but once you get in there, just know that you can't use a mouse when you're in there. It's just really keyboard arrows and everything, but let's just go into it again. There's just a few sections right here that they said to disable right here. So it says to just open that file and scroll down, allow TCP forwarding, gateway ports, X11 forwarding, and permit tunnel. All of these should be set to no. So allow TCP forwarding. Let's go ahead and change that. And these are commented out, so it really doesn't matter, but we're just going to do it for the sake of this lab, right? Gateway ports. Let's go ahead and uncomment that. And then X11 forwarding. Let's take that one out too. No. And permit tunnel is somewhere here. That's set to no. And we're going to do that. Save it. That takes care of SSH tunneling and the X11 forwarding. Again, that's just more ways that you can secure it. Not too sure what X11 forwarding. I just got into this stuff, so it's going to take me some time to grow and to learn all of that. But that's pretty much it. That lab and everything, and that room. Appreciate you guys for hanging with me. I know I was, again, stumbling around and everything, but hopefully the videos are getting better. You're getting more value out of the content. Hopefully you documented everything so that you can run through this on your own and everything like that. Click that like, give me that sub if you can, and comment below. I'm gonna holla at y'all.